Today we're reading Acts 27, verses 13 through 26. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, there arose against it a tempestuous wind, called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat. Which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we, being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. But after long absence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, this shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. In spite of Paul's warning, the captain set sail with what seemed to be a favorable south wind. But it didn't take long for the wind to change, and they find themselves in a boisterous, changing wind. The word Euroclydon is not a common one and doesn't appear anywhere else in the New Testament. But from the context we can tell it's a hurricane-like storm that tossed the ship around. Verse 15 tells us how bad it was. We let her drive. They basically had to just leave the ship to the winds as they had no way to control it any longer. Luke also tells us the ship was taking damage as they had much work to do on it. The next day they started lightening the load, indicating that the ship may have been taking on water. Verse 20 tells us that there had been many days without seeing anything but clouds and storm. It got so bad that those on board began to give up hope of surviving. And that's when God gives Paul another message for them. After much abstinence means that they had not eaten for a while. They had obviously been too busy keeping the ship afloat to even worry about food. And as they are standing there, tired, hungry, and hopeless, Paul stands up and tells them a word from God. He tells them of an angel sent from God to tell him not to fear, that he would be brought to Caesar. And on top of that, all the people on board would be saved. The bad news was that they would wreck on an island. And all of this because they wouldn't listen when God spoke. Ever been there? Suffering the consequences of not listening to God? We all do at times. And this passage shows us two things to focus on when that happens. First, we just need to turn back to Him. If we didn't listen to God, the best answer is to start now. That's the amazing thing about serving a forgiving God who loves us. And second, we just need to focus our trust on Him. He can pull us out of messes, even those of our own making. It doesn't mean we won't suffer the consequences of our actions, the shipwreck in this case, but He always has our best interest at heart. I love Paul's confidence when he says, For I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me.